Anger is an emotion created by God that has a purpose. In Matthew chapter 21, Jesus became angry, and it was a righteous anger. We read this a couple of weeks ago. Matthew chapter 21, verse 12. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out. Can't you imagine this? Drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. He overturned the tables. This is a guy that's demonstrating quite a bit of anger here, if you ask most psychologists. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers," the ESV says. Thieves, the King James says. Anger in and of itself is neither good nor bad, although I would lean more towards the good since it comes from God, and it is an emotion that we feel from God. Anger is a charged moral response, and I think we see this in Jesus. It's a charged moral natural response of protective preservation. Jesus saw something happening in the temple, and since he's God, we can understand Jesus knew exactly what the purpose of the temple was. Jesus knew what was to be conducted in the temple, and that was wrong. And Jesus demonstrates, I guess you would call it, an emotion of anger. Or maybe it's simply a perspective of correction. It can be a healthy emotion that motivates us to correct attitudes, behaviors, or injustices. You think about it. Let me rephrase that. If no one ever became angry when they saw injustice, would the world ever change? Would injustice ever be corrected? David, and I'm not going to go back here for time's sake, but David in 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 4 became angry because Goliath is hurling insults at God's people. And he says, "I will destroy you because you don't have the respect for God's people." Moses, when he came down from Mount Sinai in Exodus, and we're going to get here in the Wednesday night Bible study, Lord willing, before long. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai carrying the tablets of stone that God had written on with his own hand, the Ten Commandments, he sees the people in idolatry. And they're worshiping a golden calf. And he throws down those stones, grinds them into powder, and makes the people of Israel who were engaged in idolatry drink the water from the powder of those stones. Moses became angry with just cause. David became angry with just cause. It motivated both of those individuals to really, I think, become better leaders and to change the injustice of the world. Let me ask you this. What do you see in the world around you that makes you angry? And when is it enough for us as Christians to get up and be the leaders in our communities that we need to be to change the world? Because if we don't change the world, no one will. Now, most of the time, anger is negative. And I think this is the direction in which Don was wanting this to go. Because most of the time, we become angry, and our anger then controls us. Rather than us being in control, and I think that's what we see in Moses, his anger caused him to throw down the stones, to break the stones, And anger can be an explosion, a window of opportunity for Satan to get in. It's a period of time in which spiritual warfare takes place. Turn back with me, if you will, to the book of Proverbs. We go to Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 19, where Solomon says, "A man of great wrath will pay the penalty. For if you deliver him, you will only have to do it again." Solomon says anger is repetitive. Anger is a learned response. Anger is something, Solomon says, if you deliver someone, if you save someone from his anger, you're going to have to do it again. Because unless that person changes, it is a repetitive process. So how are we going to get over that habit? Well, over here a couple chapters, Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 24, Solomon says again to his son, and the reason Solomon is writing to his son is to help his son understand how to become a godly man. Solomon says, "Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn," verse 25, "lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." Solomon is saying, those around you influence you. All of us who have anger issues, and I throw myself into that category, all of us who have anger issues learned anger from someone. I dare say that I learned anger from my parents. And I dare say that my children are in danger, unless I learn to control that anger, are in danger of learning anger habits from me. Anger's like fire. Look at it from this perspective. Fire is necessary for life. During the wintertime, we don't even think about it. There's a fire burning in the furnace back there that heats this building. It's contained. There's a fire in the stove that cooks our food. Fire is necessary for life. The emotion of anger is necessary in a form for life. But just like fire that needs to be controlled, you never hear on the news how there's a little flame inside the furnace that heats the building. You never hear the news talking about that. What you hear the news talking about is fire that is destroying communities. Wildfires that burn, houses that are destroyed by fire. The emotion itself is not necessarily bad, but it's when it gets out of control. Over here in Proverbs chapter 29 and in verse 22, Solomon says this, "A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much," notice that word, "much transgression." In other words, a transgression is a sin. A person given to much anger causes sin.